You are currently living a fraudulent life, wearing a script written by people who will not even attend your funeral. This is the incredible story of a 33-year-old architectural restoration craftsman who spent his entire youth mutilating his own creative genius just to collect the fleeting nods of approval from his unappeasable family. What he discovered hidden inside the uncompromising growth laws of an ancient oak tree didn't just smash his people-pleasing habits. It transformed him into an unshakable, world-renowned independent designer of historic cathedral roof systems. The brutal boundary framework he implemented will completely liberate your identity from other people's expectations. Ethan adjusted the leather strap of his heavy tool belt, his boots crunching over the fragments of broken slate and ancient mortar covering the floor of his family's multi-generation restoration firm. At 33, his internal world felt like a hollowed-out building on the absolute verge of structural collapse. Ethan was a master timber frame joiner and restoration artist, a man who possessed a deep, cellular understanding of historical wood physics, ancient structural geometry, and traditional hand tool craftsmanship. He could touch a rotting, 300-year-old white oak beam and instantly feel where the core wood remained sound, map out the exact interlocking mortise and tenon joints required to save it, and visualize a soaring, beautiful structural canopy that could bear the weight of winter snows for another 3 centuries. His deepest, most meaningful dream was to establish an independent design atelier that combined ancient, raw timber craftsmanship with minimalist modern glass architecture, a legacy project that would bring organic, breathing spaces into the cold centers of modern cities. Yet, despite his brilliant hands and profound artistic vision, Ethan carried a crippling, silent psychological flaw that kept his name invisible and his pockets completely empty. He lived entirely for the validation of others. He was an aggressive, chronic people-pleaser. Before he made a single cut into a beam, drafted a blueprint, or submitted a project proposal, his mind would run through an exhausting maze of external expectations. He worried constantly about whether his traditionalist father would mock his modern design ideas, whether his demanding corporate clients would find his materials too expensive, or whether his social circle would judge him for breaking away from the established family business structure. He treated his own creative instincts like a criminal that needed to be permanently suppressed to keep everyone around him comfortable. He spent his afternoons executing boring, uninspired commercial renovation blueprints that he despised, completely mutilating his own artistic calling just to maintain a fragile, shallow piece. The deep emotional pain of this total self-betrayal slowly and systematically fractured his daily reality. His younger brother, a loud, untalented businessman who had been handed an executive title in the family firm simply because he shouted the loudest, routinely took full public credit for Ethan's complex engineering calculations. Seeing his brother stand before a crowd of local city officials, wearing a pristine tailored suit and accepting a major civic award for a historical courthouse restoration that Ethan had spent 80 hours a week physically building, left Ethan with a profound, crushing sense of internal emptiness. He returned to his small workshop that night, his throat tightening with an intense, burning resentment so severe that his hands shook, causing him to misalign a heavy broadaxe and split a piece of premium, imported cedar stock, ruining $1,000 of raw material. His chronic habit of putting everyone else's opinions before his own wasn't creating harmony. It was actively making him a ghost in his own life. He fell behind on his personal bills. His personal bank account dwindled because he constantly undercharged clients who complained about costs, and he spent his midnights pacing the floor of his cramped workshop, trapped in a severe loop of exhausting insomnia. His chest felt heavy, his breathing was shallow, and every single morning felt like an uphill battle against a phantom army of critics inside his own skull. The absolute breaking point struck on a freezing mid-autumn afternoon. The Regional Heritage Board had announced a prestigious, competitive commission to design and rebuild the vaulted timber ceiling of the city's oldest cathedral, a massive, high-profile project that Ethan had been mentally preparing for his entire adult life. He spent 3 weeks straight, secretly drafting a breathtaking, radical blueprint that perfectly interlocked ancient, heavy oak trusses with a central, floating geometric glass skylight that poured natural morning light directly onto the altar. It was a masterpiece of spontaneous engineering. However, the evening before the submission deadline, his father walked into the drafting room, looked at the sketches with a cold, dismissive frown, and shook his head. "This is too experimental, Ethan," his father said, his voice flat and heavy with traditional authority. "The Heritage Board wants safe, predictable, copycat work. Stick to the standard grid layout we've always done. Don't embarrass the family name by trying to be a pioneer." Terrified of his father's cold disapproval and desperate to maintain the illusion of being a loyal son, Ethan collapsed inside. He spent the entire night frantically erasing his original genius, throwing his masterpiece into the scrap bin and replacing it with a boring, uninspired, standard replica design that required absolutely zero creative risk. The next morning, he submitted the safe blueprint under the family firm's name. 3 weeks later, the Heritage Board announced the winner. The commission was awarded to an independent, aggressive outsider who had submitted a design nearly identical to Ethan's original floating glass concept. The board's public evaluation read, "The family firm's submission showed competent mechanics, but it was completely devoid of soul, vision, and artistic courage." The moment Ethan read those words, a sudden, violent wave of panic hit his chest so hard he vomited into the workshop sink. He had spent his entire life mutilating his own identity to make his father smile, and his ultimate reward was an empty legacy, a stolen dream, and a broken spirit. That evening, unable to bear the suffocating presence of the family workshop, Ethan drove blindly north into the ancient, protected forest preserves at the edge of the province until he reached a secluded rocky ridge where a legendary, 73-year-old master forester named Malachi lived in a hand-hewn log cabin. Malachi was a reclusive authority on old-growth silviculture, a man who had spent 4 decades advising international conservation boards on forest structural mechanics without ever seeking fame or corporate wealth. He sat on a rough stump outside his cabin, slowly sharpening an old logging crosscut saw with a hand file, his movements completely relaxed, unhurried, and quiet. Malachi noticed Ethan staring into the dark woods with a wild, manic expression of total defeat in his eyes. "You look like a man who has built a magnificent cage for himself and is now furious that the bars are solid wood," Malachi said, his voice deep, crisp, and steady like the roots of the trees. "I've ruined my life," Ethan said, his voice cracking with a mixture of raw exhaustion and years of suppressed rage. "I have the technical skill to build masterpieces, but every time I try to execute my own vision, I freeze. I change my designs to please my father, to satisfy the clients, to keep my brother quiet. I've spent 33 years trying to be the person they want me to be, and now I have completely lost my own name. I don't even know who I am when I step up to the wood." Malachi stood up, walked over to a massive, ancient white oak tree that stood alone at the center of the clearing, its gigantic branches stretching widely against the cold autumn sky. He reached out and placed his rough hand against the thick, rugged bark. "Look at this oak, Ethan," Malachi commanded. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes following the immense contours of the trunk. "It's huge. It dominates the entire ridge." Malachi patted the trunk firmly. "This oak doesn't ask the surrounding pine trees if its branches are growing too wide. It doesn't alter its cellular ring structure to please the soil or bend its crown to make the brush beneath it comfortable. It executes its own internal genetic blueprint with absolute, uncompromising ruthlessness. It throws out its thorns, drops its acorns, and claims its territory because it knows that a tree that tries to grow according to the light preferences of the surrounding forest will be starved of nutrients and rot from the base up. Your mind is currently a crowded forest of other people's opinions, Ethan. You are starving your own genius to feed their egos. For the next 100 days, you will execute the solitary timber protocol. You will completely resign from your family's firm. You will rent a space where no one can see your work, and you will refuse to show a single blueprint or sketch to any human being until the physical piece is completely finished. You will measure your success exclusively by your alignment with your own structural standards, forcing the world to interact with your finished reality rather than your desperate need for permission. Ethan stood before his father and brother in the main office, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird. The internal resistance from his lifelong psychological habits was an absolute wall of emotional fire. As he opened his mouth to speak, his brain instantly flooded with a tidal wave of panic, screaming that he was being ungrateful, that he would destroy his family's survival, and that he would fail completely on his own. His father stared at him with a cold, intimidating glare, waiting for Ethan to back down and apologize as he always did. He sat there for a long moment, his chest heaving, his old habits pulling him toward the safety of submission. But the memory of Malachi's hand against the uncompromising bark of the ancient oak echoed in his mind. Ethan forced his spine to straighten, kept his eyes locked on his father's, and spoke with a flat, measured, and unhurried calm. "I am withdrawing my name from the firm's license," Ethan said, his voice dropping to a steady, quiet baritone. "I have rented an old barn at the industrial rail yard. I am working independently from this day forward." His brother erupted into a mocking laugh. "You won't last a month out there without our name, Ethan. You're a mechanic, not a businessman. You'll be begging to come back before the winter freeze." His father simply turned his chair away in silent, icy rejection. Ethan walked out of the office, carrying nothing but his personal hand tools in a canvas bag. The sense of isolation was immediate and terrifying, but for the first time in his adult life, the air entering his lungs felt completely clean. He began his daily discipline inside the drafty, unheated barn at the rail yard. The environment was brutal. He had no corporate machinery, no team of apprentices, and very little capital. He had to spend his meager savings on a single load of salvageable, raw, reclaimed heart pine logs. His new system was simple but unyielding: the isolation ledger. Every morning at 5 a.m., before the rest of the city was awake, he would open his notebook and write down a single design objective for the day. He strictly forbade himself from checking social media, looking at industry trends, or calling anyone for advice. When he picked up his drafting pencil, if his brain began to whisper, "What would father say about this joint?" he would instantly close his eyes, take a deep breath, and force his attention back to the physical density of the wood in front of him. He forced his hands to execute the design exactly as he visualized it, with zero modifications for external approval. The first major challenge struck during his third week of isolation. A local commercial property developer who had heard of Ethan's independent departure came to the barn to offer him a quick $40,000 contract to build a series of cheap, standard decorative faux beams for a new suburban shopping mall. It was a massive amount of money for a man living on coffee and bread, but the client demanded that the work be done using cheap, veneered particle board instead of solid wood, and insisted on modifying Ethan's structural layout to save time. The old Ethan would have instantly compromised, smiling and saying yes to keep the client happy and secure the validation of a paycheck. He stood in the cold barn, his hands sweating against his tool handles, looking at the contract. He looked at his ledger. The design violated every single internal standard of structural integrity he had set for himself. He looked the developer directly in the eyes, his face an absolute mask of calm, detached neutrality. "I do not work with veneered particle board," Ethan said, his voice steady and completely unhurried. "If you want cheap decorative work, you will need to find another shop. I only build solid timber frame systems." The developer looked completely stunned, insulted Ethan's business sense, and stormed out of the barn, slamming the door. The silence that followed was heavy. Ethan sat down on a pile of wood shavings, his stomach twisting with a sudden fear of financial ruin. But as he looked at his raw logs, a new, remarkable discovery surfaced inside his awareness. By saying no to the external demand, he had preserved his internal space. He hadn't lost a client. He had protected his own foundation. He poured that fierce, protective energy entirely into his work. He began designing a massive, independent exhibition piece, a 12-foot-tall, freestanding geometric pavilion made entirely of interlocking black walnut timbers, joined using an incredibly complex ancient Japanese three-way mortise system that required a level of hand tool precision down to the millimeter. He worked 14 hours a day in total solitude, his fingers calloused, his muscles hardening, and his clothes permanently covered in wood dust. He stopped seeking external approval entirely because he was completely consumed by the intense discipline of mastering the material. Small, beautiful signs of structural success began to populate the barn. He wasn't producing safe, copycat blueprints anymore. He was creating physical wooden structures that possessed an organic, raw power. His growing confidence completely transformed his posture and his presence. The frantic, nervous energy that had made his shoulders slouch for a decade completely vanished, replaced by a deep, stoic, and silent rhythm. He discovered that when you stop leaking your vital life energy into trying to manage other people's emotions, your mind gains an incredible, sharp, and analytical focus. My friend, this story is not really about timber framing, historical blueprints, or ancient oak trees. It is a severe psychological mirror showing you the exact danger of treating your life as a script written by the expectations, fears, and demands of the people around you. Every single hour you spend modifying your dreams, undercharging for your value, or waiting for a critic's permission before you begin your work, is a piece of your identity you are actively murdering. Other people's opinions are an illusion. The question is not whether the world will try to force you into a comfortable cage of compliance. The question is whether you have the raw courage to break the chains, trust your own vision, and begin building your own life right now. Stand your ground and begin.